Good morning, COM 100 and COM 230. Today I want to talk a little bit about your questions that came about relative to the journals. Now, with the journals specifically, some of you have asked me about what are they, why is it on the grade book, what am I supposed to submit, etc. The journals are covered in the syllabus, and we've talked about them from day one. You might not specifically have remembered with the kind of chaos that has been ensuing as a result of everybody being home and trying to figure out what they want to do and what they need to be doing, etc. And I'm going to try and make this as simple as possible. The end of the semester is coming very quickly. Your end of semester large projects we're going to forego, and what I'm really going to focus on relative to your grades are the things that we've been working on. Reading the chapter, having you go through the lectures that I've been putting on video in that respect, doing discussion board questions, doing quizzes, and if we can cover that, I'm going to be relatively assured that you've got a good understanding of the material relative to what we need to have to pass these courses. But let's talk about the journals, because the journals are important too. There were 5 of them that were required over the course of the semester. You might remember me saying that this course, in both courses, is the primary responsibility for these, as far as I'm concerned, really lies in you being able to make connections between the communication discipline and the real world. You see, it's one thing to talk about communication topics in theory and in the classroom and kind of talk about them from an academic perspective. But if you can't apply it to the real world, it doesn't make any sense, and it really won't help you navigate society and thus your life and career in general. That's what communication's value is to you. We've talked about that. So having said that, the journals were always about doing it in perhaps 3 parts. And those 3 parts go like this. The first part, you're going to basically take a term. And remember, I said either from the last chapter we did or the next chapter that we're working on right now. But in this case, taken from the whole book. Whatever really kind of struck you as you've been thinking about communication in the book, or flipping through the book and going, I really liked that concept. Okay, so what I want you to do is threefold. Number one, I want you, in part 1, I want you to define a couple of the terms or theories that you find in the book that you like, but I want you to define it not necessarily how the book defines it, but in the spirit of the book's definition in your own words, so that I am aware that you have a good understanding of the term and can essentially articulate what that means. The second part of the journal, you're going to, in essence, tell me a story. Now, I would normally like you to tell me something about where you saw this term, either A, being demonstrated, or B, where it wasn't demonstrated, and had the communication participants in whatever interaction we're talking about, had they specifically paid attention to this topic, then you would have seen a very different outcome. So tell me a story. Normally I would have you tell me what's happened, what have you witnessed or been a part of in your life in the last week that would demonstrate this particular topic. However, you may be quarantined by yourself, and thus communication might be sparse, and I get that. So I want you to think a little bit about where in your life in the last couple of months that you've seen either a really great example of a communication interaction having taken place where this will have been exhibited, demonstrated, and tell me about it. Because I want to see that you can see where this is actually taking, this term, this theory, this concept is taking place in the real world. Or I want you to tell me a story about an interaction, and it didn't include this concept, etc., but tell me how it would have been better after you explain the outcome having been not so nice. How this would have been better if the concepts that you're talking about had been applied. So, part 1, define the term. Part 2, give me a story. But you see, that whole would have been better if it had been applied comes actually in part 3. So in part 3, I want you to actually write down and connect the dots. Part 2, just tell me the story. Part 3, connect the dots between paragraph 1 and paragraph 2. So what you're going to do in paragraph 3 is you're going to tell me exactly that. This is a really good example of this story illustrates a really good example of this particular concept, and here's why. Dissect it and point it out to me. Alternatively, what you can do is dissect it and tell me why this was not a good example of a communication interactive incident, but had these concepts been applied, this is how you believe it would have been better. The journal articles are not hard. They're just an exercise for you to convince me and show me that you are actually able to take the terms from the book and terms from communication and apply them to the real world. If you can do that for your journals, you are 100% on board and looking good. Okay. Upload the ones you've done previously if you've got them saved. In journals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you're doing new ones, upload them in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 because those are obviously worth a nice little percentage point of your grade, and they're easy to do. So don't miss out on them. And do them, if you've got to sit down and just spend your time and do. Now that if you're listening to this going, wow, I missed the boat completely, then spend your time that you've got now and catch up on them and get them uploaded as soon as you can. Thanks so much. Next couple of videos, we're going to go ahead and look at the next section and talk a little bit about each of the classes, COM 100 and COM 230, individually. So stay tuned.